Welcome to the Forgotten Narrator. Alright, let's talk about the Tyranids, the galaxy's apex predators, the ultimate consumers, and the most relentless force of destruction known to the Warhammer 40k universe. They are a nightmare-given flesh, an endless tide of claws, teeth, and bioweapons that devour everything in their path. Planets crumble beneath their advance, star systems vanish from the galactic map, and entire civilizations are reduced to biomass to fuel their ever-growing swarms. It's hard to imagine anything that could truly terrify such a force, given their single-minded purpose and complete disregard for fear or mercy. But what if, despite their overwhelming power, there exists something even more terrifying than the Imperium's guns, the Astartes' blades, or the Exterminatus protocols? The idea alone is unsettling. For all their savagery, the Tyranids are still driven by an ancient, deeply ingrained survival instinct, a primal urge to consume and grow, to adapt and overcome. And if we consider the vast star-devouring nature of the hive mind itself, we must also consider that even the most dominant predators can still sense danger. It's the nature of the hunt. The stronger the beast, the sharper its instincts for survival. So, what could be so utterly horrifying that even these devourers of worlds might instinctively recoil from it? Perhaps the real question isn't just about what the Tyranids are running from, but why? Why would they flee? What unimaginable terror could drive them to alter their path, and what implications might this have for the galaxy they seek to consume? These questions push us into the darkest corners of the galaxy's history, into the unknown voids beyond even the Tyranids' grasp, where ancient horrors and cosmic predators might still stir in the darkness. Alright, if we want to understand what might be terrifying enough to drive the Tyranids into a galactic retreat, we first need to grasp what they are and where they came from. The origins of the Tyranids are shrouded in deep cosmic mystery. They didn't arise within our galaxy, which makes them fundamentally different from most other xenospecies that have developed alongside humanity, the Eldar, and the countless other civilizations that clawed their way up from primordial ooze to galactic significance. The Tyranids are true outsiders, invaders from the unimaginable void between galaxies, a place so distant and hostile that even the warp struggles to reach it. Their journey into our galaxy likely began eons ago, far beyond the reach of even the longest-lived Eldar seers or the ancient Necron dynasties. This is a species that has evolved not just to survive, but to dominate, to consume, and to outlast any obstacle it encounters. Their very existence is built on the principle of perpetual adaptation, a never-ending cycle of evolution driven by the relentless pressure of survival in a universe that offers no mercy. Every gene, every organ, every muscle fiber is honed for a singular purpose: to consume and evolve. This isn't just survival of the fittest, it's survival of the hungriest. But why did they leave their original galaxy in the first place? This question has haunted xenobiologists and inquisitors alike. Some theorize that their home galaxy might have been fully consumed, reduced to a barren wasteland of dead worlds stripped of all life, their purpose fulfilled in a final, all-consuming feast. Others suggest a more chilling possibility, that something far worse than the Tyranids themselves might have driven them out. After all, even a predator must eventually face something it cannot overcome. It's an unsettling thought, the idea that these apex consumers might have been fleeing a force so terrifying that the only choice was to abandon their home galaxy entirely. Their motivations, however, remain a point of fierce debate. Unlike the orcs, who live for the thrill of battle, or the Eldar, who cling to the remnants of their lost glory, the Tyranids are a force of pure instinct. They do not conquer for the sake of pride or glory. They have no concept of empire, no interest in ruling, and no desire for territory. They consume because it is their nature, because it is the only way they know to survive. They strip entire worlds of biomass, reduce civilizations to nothing but genetic code, and use the remnants to spawn new, ever more efficient killing machines. It's an existence defined by hunger, an endless, all-consuming need to feed the hive mind. And that hive mind, now that's something truly unique. It's not just a collection of creatures acting on instinct. It's a single galaxy-spanning consciousness that coordinates every Tyranid organism, from the smallest ripper to the mightiest hive tyrant, with a precision and speed that no other species can match. This gestalt intelligence is what truly sets the Tyranids apart. It's what makes them so terrifying. They don't just adapt individually, they adapt as a whole, learning from every battle, every failure, every encounter, and incorporating that experience into their genetic code. But this raises an even darker question. If the Tyranids fled their home galaxy to escape some unimaginable horror, then what could possibly be more terrifying than a species defined by its absolute and unyielding desire to consume? What could make even the most ruthless predators in the known universe recoil in terror? To answer that, we need to look deeper into the nature of their hive consciousness, their strange, almost supernatural connection to one another, and the possible threats that might exist beyond even their comprehension. What if the Tyranids are not the apex predators they appear to be, but merely a fleeing prey, desperately trying to stay one step ahead of something even more ancient, even more relentless, and far more horrifying? This thought alone should send a chill down the spine of even the most hardened Imperial commander. Where if that is the case, then the galaxy might not just be facing an invasion. It might be caught in the crossfire of a cosmic hunt that has been raging for billions of years. The question of what truly drives the Tyranids is one that has puzzled scholars, inquisitors, and even the most seasoned Xenos hunters for centuries. To understand them, we need to strip away our assumptions about conventional motives. The Tyranids don't conquer for glory like the Astartes, nor do they fight for survival in the traditional sense. They don't crave territory or wealth, and they have no concept of empire. They are, in the most literal sense, a hunger-given form, a primal, instinctive force that exists solely to consume, adapt, and evolve. But this simplistic explanation doesn't quite capture the full horror of their nature. At the core of every Tyranid swarm is the hive mind, a consciousness so vast and alien that it defies human comprehension. It is a single, all-encompassing intellect that links every Tyranid organism, from the smallest spore to the most massive biotitan, into a seamless, perfectly coordinated network. This is not a simple hierarchy, but a true collective intelligence, a gestalt entity that thinks and acts as one. It is a mind that spans entire star systems, reacting in real time to the shifting tides of battle, adjusting its tactics and strategies without hesitation or error. It doesn't simply control its creatures, it is them, in a way that is both awe-inspiring and deeply unsettling. But why do they move ever forward, sweeping across the galaxy in a wave of flesh and bone that consumes everything in its path? Some might argue that it's purely a matter of biology, that the Tyranids, like a forest fire or a plague of locusts, simply consume until there is nothing left to consume. But this perspective misses the deeper, more chilling truth of their nature. They are not just eating, they are harvesting, collecting genetic material from every species they encounter, breaking down entire ecosystems to their molecular components, and absorbing this raw material into their ever-evolving gene pool. This process of continuous adaptation is one of the Tyranids' greatest strengths. It's what allows them to overcome even the most formidable defenses, to crack the shells of mighty fortresses and bring down the towering war machines of the Mechanicus. They evolve not just in the physical sense, but on a strategic level as well. Every defeat is a lesson, every setback an opportunity for growth. The hive mind doesn't just learn, it refines, perfects, and optimizes, turning every battle into a step closer to its ultimate form. But to what end? This is where the real mystery lies. If the Tyranids are simply driven by the desire to consume, then why have they left the relative safety of their own galaxy to invade ours? It's a question that has sparked endless debate among Imperial scholars. Some believe that they are driven by a biological imperative to spread and reproduce, to fill every corner of the universe with their own genetic code. Others suggest a more sinister motive, that the hive mind is not merely a mindless devourer, but a being of unimaginable intellect and ambition, seeking to transcend its physical limitations by absorbing the genetic knowledge of every living thing in the universe. There are even darker theories. What if the Tyranids are not the masters of their own destiny, but merely the puppets of a far greater, even more alien force. What if the hive mind itself is a pawn in a game being played out on a cosmic scale? Its hunger merely a tool in the hands of an intelligence so vast and incomprehensible that it makes even the mightiest Necron overlords seem insignificant by comparison? It's a chilling thought, one that raises uncomfortable questions about the nature of intelligence, free will, and the ultimate fate of the galaxy. And then there is the possibility that the Tyranids are not simply consuming to survive, but to prepare. Perhaps they are not just a plague, but a weapon. A living, evolving armada sent ahead of something far worse, something that views even the Tyranids as mere pawns in its grand design. If that is the case, then the galaxy may be facing a threat far greater than even the most nightmarish visions of the Inquisition have dared to imagine. In the end, we may never fully understand what drives the Tyranids. They are, by their very nature, a force of entropy. A living, thinking virus that seeks only to consume and reproduce, to spread and adapt, to overcome and evolve. They are the ultimate predators, the apex consumers, and the final word in biological efficiency. And if they truly are fleeing from something, if there is indeed a greater predator out there, then we may all be living on borrowed time. For all their terrifying power and relentless hunger, the Tyranids have one clear, undeniable adversary in the galaxy: the Imperium of Man. On the surface, it might seem absurd to imagine the Tyranids fearing anything, let alone the fractured, stubborn remnants of a once great human empire. After all, the Tyranids are the ultimate consumers, a force of pure predation that adapts, overcomes, and consumes without hesitation. They are, by their very nature, the end of all things. Yet, the Imperium remains one of the few forces capable of standing against them, even if only for a time. This alone suggests that the Tyranids may not be as fearless as they seem. The Imperium's strength lies not just in its sheer size, but in its unyielding resolve. It's a civilization built on the bones of 1,000,000 worlds, its armies drawn from countless planets, each with its own unique warriors, traditions, and technologies. The Astra Militarum alone represents the largest fighting force the galaxy has ever known, a seemingly endless tide of human soldiers willing to sacrifice themselves in the name of the God Emperor. And while individual guardsmen are no match for the bioengineered horrors of the Tyranid swarms, the sheer weight of their numbers can slow even the mightiest hive fleet. It's a brute force strategy, a meat grinder approach that might seem hopelessly outdated in the face of the Tyranids' biological perfection, but it works. For every world consumed, a dozen more stand ready to fight. And then there are the Space Marines, the Angels of Death, the superhuman warriors forged in the fires of the Emperor's Great Crusade. Unlike the Tyranids, who rely on sheer numbers and genetic adaptation, the Astartes represent the pinnacle of human genetic engineering, each one a living weapon designed to overcome the horrors of the galaxy through sheer power, discipline, and unbreakable will. They are not merely soldiers, but symbols of humanity's defiance, the living embodiment of the Emperor's wrath. In many ways, they are the perfect counter to the Tyranid threat, fast, adaptable, and utterly unafraid to face even the most monstrous Xenos in close combat. But what truly sets the Imperium apart, what might genuinely give the Tyranids pause, is its unshakable faith. The cult of the God Emperor is a weapon as powerful as any bolter or chainsword, a force that drives entire populations to stand their ground against the impossible. The Tyranids may have a collective intelligence that spans the stars, but they lack the one thing that has allowed humanity to survive against all odds: a belief in something greater than themselves. This faith fuels not just the common soldier, but the mighty war machines of the Adeptus Mechanicus, the fanatical zealots of the Adeptus Sororitas, and the terrifying psychic might of the Grey Knights. And let's not forget the Imperial Navy, the largest fleet in the galaxy, a force capable of leveling entire star systems and reducing worlds to molten slag with the power of its warships. Even the Tyranids, for all their adaptability, struggle to overcome the sheer destructive power of a full-scale exterminatus, the imperial tactic of annihilating a planet to deny its biomass to the hive fleets. It's a brutal, scorched earth strategy that speaks to the desperation of the Imperium, but it's also one of the few tactics that can genuinely halt a Tyranid invasion. Yet, for all their power, the Imperium's greatest weapon against the Tyranids might be its unpredictability. The hive mind is a creature of pure logic and instinct, a being that learns and adapts but lacks the chaotic, unpredictable nature of human thought. It can't truly comprehend the madness of an Imperial commander ordering his fleet into a suicidal charge, or the sheer stubbornness of a guardsman refusing to retreat even as his world burns around him. This unpredictability, this raw, bloody-minded determination, is something the Tyranids cannot adapt to because it defies their very nature. Of course, this is not to say that the Imperium can defeat the Tyranids outright. The hive fleets continue to press deeper into Imperial space, their numbers seemingly without end, their hunger insatiable. Yet, for all their power, the Tyranids have not yet consumed the Imperium. They have been beaten back, time and again, by the very force they likely see as their greatest rival in this galaxy. Perhaps then, the Tyranids fear not just the guns and ships of the Imperium, but the sheer stubbornness and resilience of the human spirit itself. For in a galaxy filled with horrors beyond imagination, it is humanity's ability to endure, to adapt, and to fight even in the face of certain doom that might truly terrify the Tyranids. One of the most intriguing and unsettling ideas circulating among Warhammer 40k fans is the possibility that the Tyranids are not actually the apex predators they appear to be. Instead, what if they are merely prey, fleeing from something far more terrifying than even the Imperium's might? It's a theory that turns our understanding of the Tyranids on its head, transforming them from the galaxy's ultimate consumers into desperate refugees. Driven not by hunger alone, but by an all-consuming fear of something lurking in the dark voids beyond our galaxy. One of the more popular theories suggests that the Tyranids' flight into our galaxy is not an invasion at all, but an escape, a last, desperate bid for survival as they flee a far greater predator. This idea gains some credibility when you consider the sheer distance they have traveled. Crossing the intergalactic void is not a trivial undertaking, even for a species as biologically advanced as the Tyranids. It's a journey that likely took millions, if not billions, of years, requiring them to consume entire galaxies along the way to sustain themselves. So, what could possibly force such a relentless, predatory species to abandon its own galaxy and flee into ours? One possibility is that their home galaxy was not simply consumed, but utterly devastated by something even more destructive than the Tyranids themselves. Some fans have speculated that this unknown threat could be a species of unimaginable power, perhaps even more ancient and advanced than the Necrons or Old Ones. A race so formidable that even the Tyranids, with all their adaptability and ferocity, could not overcome it. This might explain the near hysterical speed with which the hive fleets have spread across the Milky Way, consuming everything in their path, as they race to put as much distance as possible between themselves and their former home. Others suggest an even darker possibility, that the Tyranids are not merely fleeing a physical threat, but something far more abstract and terrifying. What if their flight is not just about survival, but about escape from a force so all-consuming that it poses a direct threat to the hive mind itself? Perhaps a psychic predator, a being or force that feeds not just on flesh and bone, but on the very consciousness that unites the Tyranids into a single, galaxy-spanning intelligence. In this context, their relentless consumption of biomass could be seen not just as a strategy for survival, but as a desperate attempt to build up their strength for a final, apocalyptic confrontation with this unknown horror. There are even wilder theories that push the boundaries of known lore. Some fans speculate that the Tyranids may be fleeing the remnants of an ancient, galaxy-spanning war, a conflict so catastrophic that it shattered entire galaxies and left the void littered with the corpses of dead civilizations. In this scenario, the Tyranids might not be the first great devourers to stalk the stars, but merely the latest in a long line of predatory superorganisms that have risen and fallen over billions of years. If this is true, then the hive fleets could be nothing more than the remnants of a once mighty empire, desperately fleeing the vengeful remnants of a long-forgotten enemy. Another, even more unsettling theory is that the Tyranids are not running from a single, identifiable foe, but from the slow, inevitable collapse of reality itself. After all, The warp is a chaotic, ever-shifting dimension that feeds on the emotions and thoughts of sentient beings. If the Tyranids' home galaxy was particularly rich in psychic life, it's possible that the sheer weight of its collective suffering and fear eventually tore a hole in reality itself, creating a warp storm so vast and destructive that even the hive mind could not contain it. This might explain why the Tyranids seem so intent on consuming every last shred of psychic potential in our galaxy, as if trying to prevent the same catastrophe from occurring again. Of course, these are just theories, whispers in the dark corners of the galaxy, the wild speculations of those who have stared too long into the abyss. But they raise a chilling question. If the Tyranids are truly fleeing from something, then what happens when they reach the core of our galaxy and find themselves cornered once more? Will they turn and make their final stand, or will they keep moving, devouring world after world in a desperate bid to stay one step ahead of the darkness that haunts them? For now, all we can do is speculate, watch, and prepare, because if the Tyranids truly are fleeing from a greater predator, then we may soon find ourselves facing not just one nightmare, but two. One of the most puzzling aspects of the Tyranid invasion is the strange and often inconsistent behavior of their biofleets. For a species supposedly driven by a single all-consuming purpose, the Tyranids sometimes act in ways that defy their usual cold, predatory logic. There have been documented cases where entire hive fleets have hesitated, changed direction, or even retreated in the face of certain foes, displaying a level of caution that seems almost uncharacteristic for a species so defined by its relentless hunger. This has led many within the Imperium, and even some of the more curious Xenos races, to speculate that the Tyranids might indeed be running from something that even their terrifying hive mind fears. One such example is the behavior of Hive Fleet Jormungandr, a fleet known for its tendency to burrow deep into planets, using its vast network of tunneling organisms to undermine enemy defenses from below. Yet, there have been reports of Jormungandr abruptly altering its course upon encountering certain unknown signals or psychic disturbances. It's as if the fleet senses a danger it cannot overcome, choosing to avoid confrontation rather than press forward into the unknown. This kind of strategic withdrawal is not unheard of among sentient species. But for the Tyranids, it represents a significant break from their usual pattern of all-out consumption. Even more striking are the reports surrounding Hive Fleet Tiamat, one of the oldest and most mysterious of the known fleets. Tiamat has been observed engaging in behavior that defies all conventional Tyranid tactics, building vast, coral-like biostructures around entire star systems, as if attempting to fortify its position rather than expand outward. Some have suggested that this might be a sign of fear, a desperate attempt to create a safe haven against a threat that even the hive mind considers too dangerous to confront directly. It's as if Tiamat has chosen to dig in and prepare for a fight it knows it cannot flee from. Then there is the case of Hive Fleet Leviathan, perhaps the most infamous of all the Tyranid swarms. Leviathan is known for its aggressive, multi-pronged invasions, striking from both above and below the galactic plane in a coordinated assault that has shattered countless Imperial worlds. Yet, even Leviathan has shown signs of hesitation in the presence of certain unknown signals detected at the fringes of known space. In some instances, entire tendrils of the fleet have been observed diverting around seemingly unremarkable systems, as if trying to avoid something lurking within the shadows of the void. These oddities have sparked endless debate among Imperial xenobiologists, inquisitors, and even some of the more curious Xenos species, like the Tihau and Eldar. What could possibly cause a creature as fearsome and single-minded as a Tyranid to hesitate, to retreat, or to abandon a potential feeding ground? Some have suggested that these biofleets might be reacting to the presence of psychic anomalies, perhaps even the remnants of ancient Xenos civilizations that once held dominion over the galaxy. Others believe that the Tyranids are avoiding contact with certain forms of warp-based life, entities so dangerous that even the hive mind considers them too great a risk to engage. There are even darker theories, whispered in the shadowed halls of the Inquisition, that suggest the Tyranids might have encountered something even more terrifying than the forces of chaos. After all, The warp is not a singular force, but a roiling sea of madness filled with entities far older and more powerful than even the chaos gods themselves. It's possible that the Tyranids have stumbled upon one of these ancient horrors, a being so vast and incomprehensible that even their collective consciousness cannot fully grasp its nature. If this is true, then the strange behavior of these biofleets might be less about caution and more about survival, an instinctive primal fear that even the hive mind cannot suppress. Of course, it's also possible that we are simply misinterpreting the actions of a species so alien that even our most advanced technologies and deepest psychers struggle to comprehend its thoughts. Perhaps the Tyranids are not retreating at all, but merely adapting to an unseen threat in ways we cannot yet understand. After all, they are a species defined by their ability to evolve, to adapt, and to overcome. It's entirely possible that these strange behaviors are part of a larger, long-term strategy that we have yet to fully comprehend. But whatever the truth may be, one thing is clear. The Tyranids are not as predictable as they first appear. They are not mindless beasts, but a cunning, adaptive force that can change its tactics in response to even the most unexpected threats. And if they truly are running from something, if even the mighty hive fleets can feel fear, then we may be facing a threat far greater than anything the galaxy has ever known. When we talk about the Tyranids possibly fleeing from something even more terrifying than themselves, it's impossible not to consider the ancient horrors that once ruled this galaxy long before humanity first took to the stars. The Milky Way is old, unimaginably so, and its history is littered with the remnants of forgotten empires and unspeakable horrors that defy even the darkest nightmares of the present age. Some of these ancient beings might still be lurking in the dark corners of the galaxy, waiting for their moment to rise again. And it's not unthinkable that the Tyranids, with their hyper-evolved survival instincts, might sense their presence. One of the most obvious candidates for such a horror is the Necrons. These ancient, deathless beings were once the Necron Tyre, a mortal race that traded their souls for cold, unfeeling metal bodies and near immortality. They served the Tan, star-eating gods that fed on the life force of entire worlds and waged a war of unimaginable scale against the Old Ones, the mysterious, godlike beings who once shaped the very fabric of the galaxy. The Necrons' technology is so advanced that it borders on magic, and their weapons can tear apart the very fabric of reality itself. Entire star systems have been shattered by their war machines, and their mastery over the physical universe is so complete that even the Tyranids, with all their biological adaptability, might struggle to stand against them. And then there are the Citan themselves, the so-called star gods that the Necrons once worshipped as living deities. Though the Necrons eventually shattered their physical forms and imprisoned their shattered essences in fragments, the Citan remain some of the most dangerous entities in the galaxy. Each shard is a living piece of a god, a creature of pure cosmic energy that can twist reality with a thought, and even a single shard has the power to annihilate entire armies with ease. If the Tyranids have encountered something similar in their travels, it's easy to imagine them retreating in terror, unwilling to face an enemy that can consume not just their bodies but their very souls. But the galaxy holds far darker secrets than even the Necrons and their shattered gods. There are whispers of older, more primal horrors that predate even the war in heaven. Some Eldar legends speak of nameless, formless entities that once stalked the void, feeding on the lifeblood of stars and devouring entire worlds. These creatures, if they ever truly existed, would have been wiped from history long before the first humans walked on Terra, their names forgotten even by the ancient races that once ruled the stars. And yet, some believe that these entities still exist, slumbering in the cold depths of the galactic core or lurking in the forgotten corners of reality, waiting for their chance to rise again. There are also the strange, otherworldly entities known as enslavers, creatures that thrive on psychic energy and have the power to warp reality itself. During the final days of the war in heaven, it is said that these beings swept through the galaxy like a plague, enslaving entire populations and driving countless species to extinction. They are thought to exist within the depths of the warp, feeding on the psychic echoes of sentient life, And it's possible that the Tyranids, with their hypersensitive synaptic networks, might be particularly vulnerable to their influence. If the hive mind has detected the presence of such creatures in our galaxy, it's not hard to imagine why it might choose to flee rather than risk a confrontation. Of course, these are just the legends we know about. The galaxy is vast, and there are likely countless other horrors that have never been recorded, creatures so ancient and so alien that even the Tyranids, with their vast genetic memory, have no record of their existence. Some might be the remnants of failed bioweapon experiments conducted by the Old Ones, or the twisted creations of mad xenoscientists from long-extinct empires. Others might be beings of pure entropy, entities that feed not on flesh and blood, but on the very fabric of reality itself. And then there are the truly disturbing possibilities. The idea that the Tyranids might be fleeing not just from physical threats, but from something far more abstract and terrifying. Perhaps they are running from the slow, inevitable heat death of their own galaxy, or from some kind of all-consuming psychic force that is slowly eating away at their collective consciousness. If that's the case, then the Tyranids might not just be predators, but refugees, desperately trying to stay one step ahead of a force that even their relentless hunger cannot overcome. In the end, the truth may be far stranger than anything we can imagine. The galaxy is a place of endless horror and unfathomable mystery, a place where even the most powerful races can be reduced to nothing more than echoes in the void. And if the Tyranids, with all their power and adaptability, truly fear something in the darkness, then perhaps we should be afraid as well. One of the more intriguing theories surrounding the Tyranid invasion is the idea that they might not be fleeing from a singular, all-consuming threat, but rather from the inevitable cycle of destruction that has claimed countless civilizations before them. It's a chilling thought, one that suggests the galaxy itself might be trapped in an endless loop of rise and fall, where every great empire, every mighty species, and every cosmic predator is eventually brought low by forces beyond their control. If this is true, then the Tyranids might be running not from a single terrifying foe, but from the grim reality that even the mightiest beings in the galaxy are ultimately doomed to extinction. The idea of a galactic cycle is not a new one. The galaxy has seen countless empires rise and fall over the course of billions of years, each one believing itself to be the pinnacle of evolution, only to be swept aside by the next wave of conquerors. The Old Ones, for example, once ruled the galaxy with their near-divine mastery of the warp and biological engineering, creating entire species as weapons in their wars against the Necrons and their Titan overlords. Yet, for all their power, the Old Ones eventually fell, brought low by their own hubris and the unpredictable forces they had unleashed. The Necrons themselves, once the most feared beings in the galaxy, were forced into stasis for millions of years after their war with the Old Ones, reduced to little more than forgotten relics buried beneath the sands of countless worlds. Even now, as they slowly awaken from their ancient tombs, they find themselves a shadow of their former glory. Their empire shattered, and their Citan masters reduced to little more than fractured, bitter fragments of their once godlike selves. If the Necrons, with all their technological might and mastery over the physical universe, could be brought low, then what hope do the Tyranids have of escaping the same fate? And then there are the Eldar, a once proud race that built a vast, galaxy-spanning empire in the wake of the Necrons' fall, only to be brought to the brink of extinction by their own arrogance and decadence. Their fall gave birth to the chaos god Slaanesh, a being so powerful that it shattered their entire civilization in a single cataclysmic moment, reducing the proud craftworlds to a desperate, scattered remnant clinging to the edges of the galaxy. If the Tyranids have learned anything from their consumption of Eldar worlds, it is that even the mightiest empires can fall, their achievements reduced to dust and echoes in the warp. Some fans even speculate that the Tyranids themselves might be part of this endless cycle, the latest in a long line of cosmic predators that have swept across the galaxy, only to be driven back or destroyed by forces beyond their comprehension. Perhaps they are not the first great devourers to arise in the dark voids between galaxies, but merely the latest in a long line of star-eating monstrosities, each one doomed to be overtaken by the next great predator in an endless, brutal dance of death and rebirth. This idea gains some weight when you consider the strange, almost desperate nature of the Tyranids' advance. They do not simply consume. They strip entire worlds of biomass, absorb every scrap of genetic material, and adapt their own biology in ways that seem almost paranoid in their thoroughness. It's as if they are not just preparing for the next meal, but for some greater, more terrible challenge that they know is coming. They are not merely feeding, but fortifying, building up their strength for a final, apocalyptic struggle that they believe they cannot avoid. And if the Tyranids truly are part of this cosmic cycle, then it's possible that they have already faced their own extinction once before. Perhaps their home galaxy, now reduced to a barren wasteland, was once a thriving empire in its own right, a place where the Tyranids themselves rose to power, only to be driven to the brink of extinction by a rival species. If that is the case, then the Tyranids might be driven not just by hunger, but by a deep, primal fear of repeating their past mistakes, of being wiped out by a force they cannot overcome. Of course, this is all just speculation. The Tyranids are a deeply alien species, and their true motivations may forever remain a mystery to the lesser races of the galaxy. But if even the Tyranids, with all their cunning, adaptability, and biological perfection, fear the endless cycle of rise and fall, then perhaps the galaxy itself is a far more dangerous place than we can imagine. And if they truly are fleeing from their own extinction, then it's only a matter of time before they reach the end of their long, bloody journey, and the galaxy must face whatever horrors they are trying so desperately to escape. When we talk about the possibility of the Tyranids fleeing from a greater predator, it forces us to confront a truly unsettling question. What could possibly be more terrifying than the galaxy's most efficient killing machines? After all, the Tyranids are the apex predators of the Milky Way, a species that exists solely to consume, adapt, and evolve. They are a force of pure, biological efficiency, a living weapon designed to overcome any obstacle and devour everything in its path. So what kind of nightmare could possibly pose a threat to such a creature? One of the more popular theories among Warhammer 40k fans is the idea that the Tyranids might not be the only, or even the greatest, predators in the universe. After all, if they came from another galaxy, it stands to reason that there might be other, equally horrifying species out there, lurking in the dark voids between the stars. These could be ancient, predatory organisms that evolved in the harshest, most unforgiving environments imaginable, creatures that make even the Tyranids look small and fragile by comparison. Some speculate that these hypothetical predators might be even more advanced than the Tyranids, not just in terms of raw physical power, but in their ability to manipulate the very fabric of reality. Imagine a species that feeds not just on flesh and bone, but on the fundamental forces of the universe itself. A race of cosmic predators that consume not just biomass, but energy, gravity, or even the raw essence of time itself. If such beings exist, it's not hard to see why the Tyranids might flee before them, abandoning their home galaxy in a desperate bid to escape annihilation. Others have suggested that the Tyranids might be fleeing from something even stranger and more terrifying, a species that doesn't merely consume, but corrupts, infecting the very genetic code of its prey and twisting it into new, monstrous forms. Perhaps this hypothetical predator doesn't simply kill its prey, but absorbs it, assimilating its victims into a vast, collective consciousness that makes even the hive mind look small and primitive by comparison. In this context, the Tyranids' relentless drive to consume and adapt might be less about hunger and more about a desperate race to stay one step ahead of a species that can rewrite their very DNA with a single touch. And then there's the possibility that the Tyranids might be fleeing not from a physical predator, but from something even more abstract and terrifying. A force that exists outside the bounds of conventional reality. The warp is a chaotic, ever-shifting realm of madness and nightmare. A place where the laws of physics break down and the very fabric of space and time is twisted beyond recognition. It's a place where thoughts and emotions can take physical form, where ancient gods and primal horrors feed on the souls of the living. If the Tyranids have somehow angered one of these warp entities, or if their very presence has attracted the attention of something far worse than the Chaos Gods, then it's easy to see why they might be fleeing for their lives. There are also those who believe that the Tyranids might be running from a force even more ancient and incomprehensible than the warp itself. Some fans have speculated about the existence of beings that predate the very fabric of the galaxy, entities so vast and powerful that even the Chaos Gods themselves fear them. These might be creatures that drift through the intergalactic void like cosmic leviathans, feeding on the life force of entire star systems and leaving nothing but dead, lightless husks in their wake. If such beings exist, it's possible that the Tyranids, with all their adaptability and cunning, are nothing more than insects to them, insignificant prey to be hunted and devoured at will. And then, of course, there's the unsettling idea that the Tyranids might be fleeing not from a single species, but from the very concept of extinction itself. Perhaps they are running from a force of pure entropy, a cosmic predator that devours not just life, but the very essence of existence, erasing entire civilizations from reality itself. If such a force exists, then it's possible that the Tyranids are simply the latest in a long line of great predators to be driven to the brink of extinction, desperately trying to outrun a force that even their vast, galaxy-spanning hive mind cannot comprehend. Whatever the truth may be, one thing is certain. The galaxy is a far more dangerous place than we can possibly imagine. If the Tyranids, with all their power and adaptability, truly fear something in the darkness, then perhaps we should be afraid as well. After all, if the most ruthless predators in the universe are running scared, then what hope do the rest of us have? When it comes to the Tyranids, the fan theories are as wild and varied as the galaxy itself. Given the sheer mystery surrounding their origins and motives, it's no surprise that countless theories have sprung up to explain their behavior, each one more unsettling than the last. Some fans believe that the Tyranids are not just mindless predators, but the remnants of an ancient, galaxy-spanning empire that was shattered by a force so terrifying that even their all-consuming hunger cannot overcome their fear. Others suggest that the hive mind itself is not the ultimate predator, but a mere puppet, a tool being driven before a far greater, far more terrifying intelligence. One of the most popular theories is that the Tyranids are actually running from a species even more terrifying than themselves. This idea is rooted in the fact that the Tyranids do not simply consume biomass. They adapt, evolve, and learn from every battle they fight. It's almost as if they are preparing for something, building up their strength for a final apocalyptic confrontation. Some fans have suggested that this unseen predator might be a race of hyper-advanced, genetically perfect beings that make even the Necrons look primitive by comparison. These hypothetical beings might be capable of consuming entire galaxies in a single, all-encompassing wave, erasing all traces of their victims from the universe itself. Others take this theory a step further, suggesting that the Tyranids might be fleeing from a force that exists outside the bounds of conventional reality. After all, the Tyranids are known to have an intense, almost supernatural connection to the warp, their hive mind acting as a kind of psychic beacon that spans entire star systems. It's possible that this connection has attracted the attention of something far worse than the Chaos Gods, a being or force that feeds on the psychic energy of entire civilizations and leaves nothing but empty, lifeless husks in its wake. There are also those who believe that the Tyranids are running not from a physical predator, but from the slow, inevitable death of the universe itself. This theory suggests that the Tyranids' relentless drive to consume and adapt is actually a desperate attempt to stave off their own extinction, a last, frantic effort to gather enough biomass and genetic diversity to survive the slow, grinding decay of reality itself. If this is true, then the Tyranids are not just predators, but refugees, desperately trying to stay one step ahead of a force that even their vast, galaxy-spanning hive mind cannot comprehend. Then there are the truly outlandish theories, the ones that suggest the Tyranids might be part of a much larger, far more ancient cycle of destruction and rebirth. Some fans have speculated that the Tyranids are merely the latest in a long line of great predators that have risen and fallen over the course of billions of years, each one driven to extinction by a force that has hunted them across countless galaxies. If this is true, then the Tyranids might not even be aware of what they are running from. Their ancient primal fear buried so deep in their genetic code that even the hive mind itself cannot fully comprehend it. And then there are the truly dark theories, the ones that suggest the Tyranids might be fleeing from something even more abstract and terrifying, a force that exists not in the physical universe, but in the very fabric of reality itself. Some fans have suggested that the Tyranids are not just fleeing from a physical predator, but from the slow, inevitable decay of the warp itself, a force so vast and all-consuming that it can devour entire galaxies without leaving a trace. In this context, the Tyranids' relentless drive to consume and adapt might be less about survival and more about a desperate attempt to escape the inevitable collapse of the universe itself. Of course, these are just theories, whispers in the dark corners of the galaxy, the wild speculations of those who have stared too long into the abyss. But they raise a chilling question. If the Tyranids are truly fleeing from something, then what happens when they reach the core of our galaxy and find themselves cornered once more? Will they turn and make their final stand, or will they keep moving, devouring world after world in a desperate bid to stay one step ahead of the darkness that haunts them? Perhaps, in the end, the true horror of the Tyranids is not just their insatiable hunger, but the terrible, unspoken fear that drives them forward, an ancient, primal instinct that even the hive mind itself cannot suppress. And if that is the case, then the galaxy may be facing a threat far greater than anything the Imperium, the Eldar, or even the Chaos Gods can imagine. As we come to the end of this deep dive into the mysteries surrounding the Tyranids, it's clear that their true nature remains one of the greatest enigmas in the Warhammer 40k universe. We've explored the terrifying possibility that these relentless predators might not be the galaxy's apex species, but rather the desperate prey of something far more horrifying. From their strange, often erratic behavior to the unexplained anomalies detected at the edges of their invasion paths, there are countless signs that the Tyranids might be running from a force they cannot overcome. We've considered the idea that the Tyranids might be fleeing from an ancient galaxy-spanning predator, a being or species so powerful that even the hive mind itself cannot comprehend it. Perhaps they are running from a force that exists outside the bounds of conventional reality, a creature or intelligence that feeds on the very fabric of existence itself. Or maybe they are simply the latest in a long line of cosmic predators, each one driven to extinction by a force that has hunted them across countless galaxies, their ancient primal fear buried deep in their genetic code. We've also looked at the possibility that the Tyranids might be running from a force not of flesh and blood, but of pure entropy, a cosmic predator that devours not just life, but the very essence of reality itself. In this context, their relentless drive to consume and adapt might be less about hunger and more about a desperate attempt to escape the inevitable collapse of the universe itself, a last, frantic effort to stave off their own extinction. And then there are the darker, more abstract theories, the ones that suggest the Tyranids might be fleeing not from a physical predator, but from the slow, inevitable decay of the warp itself, a force so vast and all-consuming that it can devour entire galaxies without leaving a trace. If this is true, then the Tyranids might be little more than refugees, desperately trying to stay one step ahead of a force that even their vast, galaxy-spanning hive mind cannot comprehend. Of course, these are just theories, the wild speculations of those who have stared too long into the darkness, who have dared to imagine a universe even more terrifying than the one we already know. But they raise a chilling question. If the Tyranids are truly fleeing from something, then what happens when they reach the core of our galaxy and find themselves cornered once more? Will they turn and make their final stand, or will they keep moving, devouring world after world in a desperate bid to stay one step ahead of the darkness that haunts them? One of the most fascinating aspects of the Tyranids is their ability to adapt and evolve at an almost unimaginable speed. This is more than just a biological process, it's a form of collective memory, a way for the entire species to learn from its past encounters and incorporate those lessons into its future strategies. The hive mind isn't just a commander directing its troops from afar, but a vast, galaxy-spanning intelligence that can absorb the knowledge and experiences of every Tyranid organism, integrating those memories into its genetic code. It's a kind of living library, a biological record of every battle fought, every foe defeated, and every failure endured. But this raises an interesting question. What if the Tyranids' collective memory includes not just the genetic blueprints of the species they've consumed, but also the echoes of their own past traumas? What if their deep-seated fear of certain phenomena, their tendency to avoid certain regions of the galaxy, is not just a matter of tactical caution, but a deeply ingrained response to ancient, half-remembered horrors that once threatened their very existence? Some fans have speculated that the strange, almost skittish behavior of certain hive fleets might be a sign that the Tyranids have encountered something truly terrifying in their distant past. A predator or force so powerful that it left a permanent scar on the hive mind's collective consciousness. This would explain why certain biofleets, like Hive Fleet Jormungandr, have been known to retreat from seemingly insignificant threats or divert their course away from certain star systems without any clear reason. It's as if the hive mind senses something it cannot comprehend, a threat so profound that it instinctively avoids it, even if it cannot fully remember why. There are also those who believe that the Tyranids' relentless drive to consume and adapt is itself a response to some ancient, long-forgotten trauma. Perhaps their insatiable hunger is not just a biological imperative, but a desperate attempt to fortify themselves against a force they once faced and barely survived. This would explain why the Tyranids are so obsessed with genetic diversity, why they strip entire worlds down to their molecular components and absorb every last scrap of biomass. They are not just feeding, they are preparing, building up their strength for a final, apocalyptic confrontation with a force they cannot escape. Of course, this idea raises even more unsettling questions. If the Tyranids have encountered such a threat in their past, what kind of creature could possibly be terrifying enough to leave a lasting impression on a species defined by its relentless hunger and single-minded drive to consume? Could it be a rival super-predator? A species even more advanced and dangerous than the Tyranids themselves? Or perhaps it was some kind of cosmic predator, a force so vast and incomprehensible that even the hive mind, with all its cunning and adaptability, could not fully comprehend it. And then there's the possibility that the Tyranids are not just running from a single identifiable threat, but from the slow, inevitable collapse of their own civilization. Perhaps their home galaxy was not simply consumed, but shattered by a force so devastating that it left the Tyranids themselves on the brink of extinction. Their once great empire reduced to a scattered, desperate horde of survivors, clinging to the last remnants of their former power. If this is true, then the Tyranids' relentless drive to consume and adapt might be less about hunger and more about a desperate, instinctive attempt to avoid the same fate that once nearly destroyed them. There are also those who believe that the Tyranids' collective memory might contain echoes of even older, more primal fears, ancient instincts buried deep in their genetic code, remnants of a time when their ancestors were hunted and devoured by creatures far more terrifying than anything we can imagine. Perhaps the Tyranids themselves are not the ultimate predators, but merely the latest in a long line of great devourers, each one driven to extinction by the next, even more powerful predator in an endless, brutal cycle of rise and fall. If there's one thing that truly sets the Tyranids apart from every other species in the galaxy, it's their ability to adapt. This is not just a simple biological trick, but a core aspect of their entire existence, a fundamental part of their nature that allows them to overcome almost any obstacle. They don't just evolve in the traditional sense, slowly changing over millions of years to better suit their environment. They mutate in real time, rewriting their genetic code on the fly to overcome whatever challenges stand in their way. It's an ability that has allowed them to survive in the most hostile corners of the galaxy, to break through the defenses of entire star systems, and to overcome even the most advanced technologies of the Imperium, the Eldar, and the Necrons. But what if this extreme adaptability isn't just about survival, but about preparation? What if the Tyranids are not just consuming and evolving for the sake of growth, but are actively preparing for something even more terrifying than the Imperium's bolters or the Necron's Gauss flares? Some fans have suggested that the Tyranids' relentless drive to consume genetic material is not just about expanding their biomass, but about creating the ultimate form of life, a being or species capable of standing against a threat so terrible that it once drove them to abandon their own galaxy. This theory is not as far-fetched as it might seem. After all, the Tyranids have been known to produce specialized bioforms in response to specific threats, creating entire new strains of creatures designed to overcome particular enemies or environments. The infamous zoanthropes, for example, are thought to be the result of the Tyranids consuming a psychic species at some point in their history, their minds transformed into living psychic batteries, capable of tearing apart even the most heavily armored battle tanks with a single thought. The towering hierophants, meanwhile, are living war machines, their massive frames designed to break through even the most heavily fortified bastions of the Imperium. And then there are the mysterious, almost mythical swarm lords, creatures so cunning and adaptable that they seem to possess a form of individual intelligence, capable of learning from past defeats and outmaneuvering even the most brilliant Imperial commanders. Some fans believe that the swarm lords represent the first step in the Tyranids' ultimate goal of creating a form of life capable of independent thought, a living weapon that can stand against the unknown horrors they once fled from. There are even wilder theories, the kind whispered in the darkest corners of the internet, that suggest the Tyranids might be trying to create a being capable of standing against the very forces of the warp itself. After all, the Tyranids are one of the few species in the galaxy that seem to truly fear the warp, their synaptic networks often recoiling in horror from psychic anomalies and warp storms. If the Tyranids are indeed running from something, it's possible that they are trying to create a form of life capable of resisting or even feeding on the raw, chaotic energy of the Imperium itself. Of course, this raises the unsettling possibility that the Tyranids' entire invasion of our galaxy is not just about survival, but about experimentation, a kind of galactic-scale trial run as the hive mind refines its creations and tests them against the countless threats of the Milky Way. In this context, every battle, every invasion, every consumed world is not just a step toward conquest, but a desperate attempt to create the perfect organism, a being capable of surviving the apocalypse that drove them from their home galaxy. And then there's the possibility that the Tyranids themselves are not the final form of this process, but merely a stepping stone, a kind of biological scaffolding that the hive mind will eventually discard in favor of something even more terrifying. Perhaps the ultimate goal of the Tyranids is not just to consume all life, but to evolve beyond the need for physical bodies altogether, to become a kind of living, galaxy-spanning consciousness capable of standing against even the most powerful predators in the universe. Whatever the truth may be, one thing is certain: the galaxy is a far more dangerous place than we can possibly imagine. If the Tyranids, with all their power and adaptability, truly fear something in the darkness, then perhaps we should be afraid as well. After all, if the most ruthless predators in the universe are running scared, then what hope do the rest of us have? If you've enjoyed this deep dive into the mysteries of the Tyranids and want to hear more about the dark secrets of the galaxy, be sure to subscribe and join the conversation. There's always more to uncover, more terrifying truths to reveal, and more unsolved mysteries to explore. The galaxy is a vast and dangerous place, and we've only just begun to scratch the surface.